Welcome to Crafting Your Next Move.
Hello and welcome back to Crafting Your Next Move with Lori Kraft, Associate Broker with the Kraft team at Origin Realty Group. Lori is a top producing Houston realtor with more than 15 years of experience helping clients buy and sell homes across the greater Houston area. Known for her honest advice and boutique approach, she and her team combine cutting-edge marketing with good old-fashioned service to deliver results that speak for themselves. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're talking about the behind-the-scenes services that can make or break a home sale, from title and appraisals to surveys, easements, and everything sellers don't usually see. Lori, welcome back. It's great to see you.
Thanks. It's good seeing you too.
So when you take on a new listing, how early in the process do you start thinking about title work, surveys, and the other services that sort of keep that transaction moving?
I actually addressed some of it in my first interview with clients because all of that is very impactful and you don't want surprises once you're down the road. It's very disruptive to the whole process and it's really upsetting to clients and to the other side of the transaction as well.
You know, for a lot of sellers, the title company feels like something that just happens in the background, but what should they understand about what a title company actually does during a sale?
Your title company is your last defense for it to protect you and your property. So a title company, we call it chain of title, right? So what they're looking at is who has owned the property when, to make sure that there are no other heirs that can come out of the woodwork to make a claim, or no other individual that can make a claim. And that includes liens, like a mechanic's lien that maybe you thought you'd paid off the guy that did the tile work, but that guy said you didn't. And so he filed a lien on your property unbeknownst to you, and you don't find out about it until you go to sell. And there's this lien that's hanging out there.
Oh man.
It protects your chain. So that's one thing it does. And it depends on the state. In some states, those title companies really are very much title. That's all they do is title. In other states, like in Texas, they're the escrow company. So they are the ones that hold the monies. They make sure that all the money is transferred appropriately. They act sort of as a bank. They also do the work to make sure everything is checked. They make sure your HOA fees are paid. They make sure that the bank is paid off if there's a mortgage lien on the property. They make sure that there are no, which is kind of new to us, we don't think about it often, but leases on the property. You can get into things like solar panels, which are a whole nother talk show, but those all have to be paid off, at least in the state of Texas, prior to transfer of title. So the title company takes care of all that. They also, when I say they're the last known field for defense, they also protect in many cases from mortgage fraud, from people that are trying to steal your property or steal title. And we are seeing that as a rising white collar crime. And it is very, very devastating to people when it happens.
Wow. Wow. So what exactly does that mean? What happened? How does that unfold? Sorry, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but that's interesting.
Well, yeah. So, and this is, I'm going to tell you, I'm a little bit outside my wheelhouse. So I'm going to be speaking generalities without getting too technical or getting too much in the weeds. But basically, in this country, you show up with a warranty deed that is notarized, and it's what we call a quitclaim deed. You file it, and now the property is yours. So what happens is you get these fraudsters are really, really good at what they do. So they will file title or try to take title on properties that are vacant, properties that are just land only, or properties that haven't seen a lot of activity. For example, they've been owned for 30 years. Those are properties that are most likely going to be the most vulnerable because nobody's looking at them. You know, have a mortgage company going, wait a minute, what just happened here? Because we want to know if the title's been transferred, we need to know about it. So when it's owned in completion by an individual, nobody's looking at it. Nobody catches it. Okay. The other thing that can happen is we're having lots of scams right now where someone will find a property. They will call an agent and say, hey, look, I want to sell my property. Can you help me with this sale? Now, most agents are aware of it and onto the scam. So they'll say, sure, let's do a Zoom call. I need to meet you in person. We need to at least have eyes on you. those fraudsters have gotten a little bit more creative and a little bit more techno savvy. So they'll do a Zoom call. And if you notice, they're like this the whole time in front of the camera. They never move their head because it's a fake screen. And they have copied the ID of the person whose property it actually is. So they will put their picture up there from their driver's license or whatever they found on the web, and then they don't move. And so you think you're talking to the actual owner of the property. We've caught them because occasionally they'll tip sideways or move up or down, and then you can see the real true person behind the screen.
Wow.
Or you'll have a different language that comes through in the background, and that will kind of alert you. So most listing agents now are like, I need to meet with you. If I don't meet with you in some way, shape, or form, or through a Zoom meeting I set up, that way they can verify identity. So what happens is that person is in cahoots with a buyer, and that buyer is going to say, we're going to get your property. So they try to buy the property. They put all the money in escrow. The money changes hands. It's basically wire fraud. Wow. And the money is gone, and your property has been sold to a strange entity that you don't even know. And it takes months to clean all that mess up and get your property back. So we're really an alert for those kinds of frauds, and title company is very, very aware of it. So the first thing they're doing is making sure that all the parties to that transaction are actually who they say they are.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. I have not heard that one. That's, man, people are getting crafty with these scams, aren't they?
Exactly. Get a real job.
Yeah, come on. Why you gotta, try to stop taking from hardworking people?
Exactly. And all of the intelligence that goes into crafting these schemes and creating these schemes, you can invent something and make
something good.
Yeah, something that helps you.
Use your powers for good.
Exactly.
I want to talk about appraisals for a second. They often can be kind of stressful for sellers, especially in today's market. When you prepare a home for appraisal day, what tends to matter most in terms of setting realistic expectations?
Well, first of all, you set those expectations before you even listed the property. So what we look at, and what I tell my sellers is, you have to sell your property twice. You're going to have to sell it first to the marketplace, get a buyer that's interested in your house at a price that they feel is appropriate for this property. And the second person you have to sell it to is the appraiser, which is the bank. You have to convince the bank that if they had to foreclose on your house, they could sell it for what the buyer bought it for and not lose money. So we have to look very closely at comps, and then we have to throw out those comps that step outside the range, because that's what an appraiser is going to do. And we have to throw out those comps that are below the range. And oftentimes those include foreclosures, because an appraiser is not going to include those in their comparables and in their appraisal. I often will go over an appraisal with them so they understand how an appraiser thinks, because they're looking at from a cost approach, from a rental approach, and from a market approach. So they have 3 different metrics that they use to come up with a price. But if you don't fit in that price point, you're not going to meet appraisal. Mm-hmm. The other piece is something that you can address very quickly, is measurement. And this is something I think is really hard for people, because when you bought your house, the builder told you it was, say, 3,000 square feet. Well, what people don't understand is the builder measures outside post to outside post. Now, once you start building in that house, it comes in. And then when an appraiser measures it, they're going to measure it from inside sheetrock to inside sheetrock. And you're going to lose a few inches on every wall all throughout the house. And that can amount to a couple hundred square feet, which will matter when you have to look at the dollar per square foot. Now, that's only a part of the appraisal value, but it contributes, and it can really hurt you on the resale. So what I usually do is, ahead of time, if I'm concerned, especially if there's different measurements, like HCAD has one measurement. And by the way, that's Harris County Appraisal District, in case you're wondering, where did that H come from? So, or MCAD, which is Montgomery County. So we look at the appraisal district, and then we look at something called Realist, which is another taxing authority. And then we look at our MLS taxing authority, and we look at all 3 of those. If everybody's on the same page, you're pretty safe. But if they differ, you want an appraisal measurement. And it costs maybe $100. You're going to get an appraiser to actually come out and measure it, and then you know what they're looking at. Some appraisers will consider closet space as livable square footage, but most will not. So that's something to look at too. And it gives you a heads up. So when you go into the transaction, you've already got something to fight with, and you know that you're likely to appraise for what the list is. And we got into this a lot in COVID and we call the COVID years, right? 2020 all the way till the end of 22, where we'd have multiple offers. And what a good agent would say, look, I listed it at what I know will appraise. You want to offer 20 over it? Fine. You need to waive that appraisal, or at least waive that 20, because I will only guarantee it's going to appraise up to what I warranted it for and what we list it for. After that, it's on you, Mr. Buyer. You're going to have to make up the difference in cash.
Interesting. Yeah. So surveys and easements, also a big part of selling property in Texas. When you review a survey, what are the details that you pay the most attention to, and why do those details matter later in negotiations?
Well, you're going to look at a lot of things, but it actually is very area specific. So if I'm looking at farm and ranch, I'm going to look at cross fencing. I'm going to look at water margins. I'm going to look at easements for county. Sometimes those large acreage properties, like if you're running cattle, you've got at least 100 acres in all likelihood. So that may cross over into several counties. So you need to look at where their utility easements are, if they have any. You're going to need to maybe even look at aerial easements. There's a lot of things you have to look at with those large, expansive properties, because you're going to involve more than one county. And in some cases, you involve the railroad. So, and that's a federal deal. So you have to look at all those things. If you're looking at the typical subdivision lot, which is where most of us that do residential are looking, if you're looking at that, you want to look at where are your HOA easements. They're usually 5 feet on either side, but it depends on the neighborhood. And you want to make sure nothing is encroaching in those easements. What typically gets in those easements that you have to fight about if they weren't approved are your HVAC, big AC systems there. Normally that's already cleared with the HOA because the builder has to clear it. The other thing that you might have to look at is pool equipment. If your pool company didn't clear it with the HOA, that could come up as a problem. One thing that came up for me a couple of years ago, which was bizarre and funny, it was brand new construction. Well, that particular neighborhood required that you have fence gates on either side, because the HOA wanted to be able to get through on either side to get their utilities if they needed to, or get in their easement if they needed to. Well, the way they put the gates in, and the way they laid the HVAC is right in front of the gate. So a grown man could not squeeze between the gate and the HVAC. There was no room. I mean, I could, but even I was going sideways.
You're
and I'm
squeezing
not
in, yeah.
So we fought with the builder about it. And finally, I had to call the HOA and I had to say, look, this is your easement. How do you feel about this? They didn't put in a gate, or they put in a gate, but it's not a usable gate. And so the HOA contacted the builder, and within 24 hours after pushback for 2 weeks, HOA called and builder came out and fixed the gate. So you do have to watch for that. I think the biggest, most problematic thing for people that comes up the most frequently is pools and fences. So fences are good for 10 years. And then like in Houston, our weather is just so hard on everything. And those fences were down after about 10 years. So the HOA is going to send you a nasty letter. You're going to have to replace your fence. Well, they take a string and they run it, and they hope that they've marked it off correctly. They're not, you've got Joe Fence Company coming out. They're not looking at your survey. They're not looking at those easements. They're just going to put up the fence where they think it went. Now, 99% of the time, they're going to get it right. But in that 1%, they're going to be encroaching. Either your neighbor's now encroaching in your easements or your yard, or you're encroaching in theirs. So you always want to check your fence lines. And there's a little spot in the contract that says the buyer will or will not pay for additional coverage for those kinds of exceptions. I always say it's like $100, $200, pay for it. It's not worth fighting about. The bigger issue, and the one that is very hard to cure, is if you have either water in an easement, or you actually have pad in an easement. I had a 3-story townhome where the entire townhome, they were connected, was built directly over a utility easement. I don't know how this ever got through title to begin with. So the utility lines went up in the air, down to the ground, ran right through the middle. And there was no good way for a utility company to get to those lines if they needed to. So what we had to do is we had to go up the chain, and it had changed hands twice. So we went up the chain of title. We got it grandfathered in by the original title company. They then had to take over the title. It was kind of a brouhaha, but it got done. The only other alternative, and this is what ends up happening if you build a pool, if you have coping in your easement, it's not a big deal. Because coping they can tear up. Now, it's going to be on you to put it back, but they can get into their easement if they need to, because the utility companies actually own it. You don't own it. They own it. But if your pool company carved a little too much out and now you have cement and water in that easement, the utility company can make you tear out your pool.
Holy cow.
So at that point, what you're doing is you're calling each and every utility authority. You're calling your gas company, and if you have septic, your water, well, septic really wouldn't matter because it'd be septic lines they'd have to move. But your water company, if there's water lines there, electric, any kind of cable lines, all of that. And you have to get an exception from each and every utility company, and that can take 3 to 6 months per entity.
That's a nightmare.
So that's why you look at that survey ahead of time.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And I will tell you, we've had a couple where it was close. It was really, really close. And so, and I'm getting ahead here, but if you end up in that situation, you want to call in another survey company and you want to see if they'll redo the survey, show them where all the lines are, show them where your concern is. I will tell you the majority of the time that survey company will cure it so that you're not encroaching, because normally if you are encroaching, it's going to be by an inch. It's not going to be several feet in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do anything about it. But that is the best advice I can give somebody. If you're a buyer, you better be looking at those surveys. And when your seller says, I don't have a survey, and that's not uncommon. And sometimes the survey doesn't apply, right?
Yeah.
It's too old, or things have been added or moved, or there was not a pool there and now there is. In those cases, make sure that you allow yourself plenty of time in the contract to get the survey done and to review it, and it gives you an out.
Wow, that's interesting. There's a lot of moving parts there when it comes to the survey,
yes.
Clearly. Yeah. So as we put all this together, when you're coordinating title, appraisal, survey, lender timelines, what do you look for to make sure everyone stays aligned and that nothing gets overlooked?
First of all, I'm kind of old school, and I have like all these check boxes for myself. I haven't used a transaction coordinator in years. I would probably have to go back to one as I get more and more busy, because you don't want things falling through the cracks. Mm-hmm. But like, for example, right now I'm going to look behind me. I think I have 12 in pipeline. I'm not even sure anymore. I'm losing track of how many numbers I have, but wow. I keep a big whiteboard. And so every time I'm in my office, I refer to the whiteboard and I look at it and I go, wait, did I do that? I also have back office software. So I have a timeline on that dings me. It'll say, hey, we're still missing this. Hey, have you called on this? I also set aside 1 day a week. So like for me, it's Wednesday, it's midweek. And then I do a midweek check-in. And I check in with all my parties, with the agent on the other side. I check in with my title company. I check in with my lender. I check in. Even when I'm the seller, I want to check in with the lender. Are we still on time? Are things progressing? What do you need from me? I'm going to check in. Where are we with ordering appraisal? Where are we with that survey if we need it? So all of those things go into play. The contract itself in Texas is very thorough and provides very clear, distinct timelines. It's one of the things I put up on my chart. And it's one of the things that ding me in my back office software, because we have to plug in dates. We know that within 5 days, I'm going to have a survey. Within 2 days, I'm going to need to see that seller's disclosure if I don't already have it. So that's helpful. It keeps everybody on the same page, and it keeps the transaction moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. At least we have good technology now, but to your point too, like sometimes the old school whiteboard is just the way to go. I mean, honestly, sometimes that visual, especially for us people that were, doing business when that was more popular, it is sometimes nice to see that, Yeah, I totally get it.
And I know a lot of colleagues who have like three computers up, and then they have one screen that is always open to, it's kind of their own whiteboard. It just shows where all the transactions are and
Yeah.
where they are and things.
I
And
actually do that with my stuff. I'm
see,
not a realtor, but I do that with my stuff. Just I've got like a screen that kind of shows everything that I have on my plate.
and I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's a really good strategy too. It depends on how your brain works.
Right.
As long
Totally.
as everybody's on the same page, it's all good.
Yep, that's true. All right, good stuff. That's it for today's episode of Crafting Your Next Move. If you're thinking about selling in Cypress, Tomball, or anywhere in the greater Houston area, visit craftrealtyteam.com to learn more or connect directly with Lori and her team. Don't forget to leave us a review, and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. We got lots of great information coming your way. Lori, it's always great chatting with you. Thanks so much.
It was fun. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.